as I start the video. Remember, math requirement, 2 sessions, whether you go in person, we'd like for you to come in person. Thank you for coming. Or, yes, sir. Or you watch, okay? So everybody knows where the watch links are. I've been posting them within 24 hours. I will say Mr. Norman, hang on.
Sorry.
Mr. Norman did one yesterday afternoon, and I haven't had a chance to post his yet, but it's coming, okay? Those links will be up probably on your Rockspace page within your math course through the 20th, I believe, okay? You can also find them on TTV or in your advising. I think you all have an advising PowerPoint that you get all the time. All right. And then, of course, if you still can't find them, email Ms. Bars, that's me, and I will send you the document with the links. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I zoned out.
I understand. It's Wednesday and it's the end of the day, so it's no problem whatsoever. Okay, so welcome everybody, and yes.
Do we have to stay the whole time, since my parents probably will be here in like 10-15 minutes?
You know what? Your parents have perfect timing because we'll probably be done.
About 15 minutes.
Okay, all right, and if I'm a parent too, and you know what? You just learn how to wait a few minutes and be patient. It'll be
That's
okay.
right.
All right, have a good session, guys.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Talking about revolution and rebellion, just in general, kind of to start with, and then we'll finish up by tying it back into science. Okay, so first of all, what is a revolution? Just kind of by definition, radical changes to a society's established order. Now, this could be any sort of order: political order, cultural, economic, sexual, societal, you name it. But changes to whatever a society is currently doing into something radically different. Right? Revolutions can involve lots of different things. Political changes in terms of a type of rule or a particular ruler. Economic changes, technological, those are very common. Social changes. Usually, a revolution is a combination of 2 or more of those. They do not just have to be a war. We tend to think of revolution in terms of warfare or a violent overthrow or something like that. It does not have to be. Okay? Usually it's a combination of several of those. Right? Different types, as I just mentioned. War is the most common one. It's what comes to mind when you think about this, right? Think American Revolution during the 18th century, when the United States overthrew British rulers, colonial rule, to establish an independent country. Think of the Russian Revolution in the 20th century, or Chinese Revolution, any number of them. War is the most common one that we think of, but it certainly does not have to be the only one. We can also look at a government overthrow that doesn't necessarily involve all-out war. Right? Think French Revolution
Where
in
it's
the
basically
18th century.
basically that one time where they just cut off a bunch of people's heads.
Yes, exactly. It's not a military overthrow. It's not, where the military is divided and chooses sides or something. This is just the people rising up to overthrow an established government. Think of the Glorious Revolution in England as well. Again, it's not the military attacking the government, but the people rising up against it. Okay? Economic revolution. Think of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries, when we look at a complete upheaval of how goods are produced, and then how goods are dispersed, how they are sold. The Industrial Revolution changed everything in terms of how we go about producing goods. Okay? And lastly, social or cultural revolutions. Think the Protestant Reformation in the 17th century, Martin Luther nailing his theses to the door of the church in Wittenberg and all of that. With the split from the Catholic Church, the establishment of Protestant faiths. Think of the sexual revolution in the 20th century, the 1960s, 1970s, where women in particular get a lot more freedoms, a lot more rights, assume a lot more responsibilities. So again, war is what typically people always think of, but it doesn't have to just be that. There are lots of different types of revolutions, right? Regardless of what kind we're talking about, a lot of revolutions share some characteristics. First of all, motivation. There's a reason people do this, who start these things. They believe that the current system, whether it's economic or political or military or whatever, no longer serves the purpose of that country or of those people, whatever it might be. There's a motivation that people start this because what we have is no longer working. And there's got to be a better way to do things. Okay? Mass mobilization. Revolutions often involve large groups of people, whether it's formal or informal. Okay? This can start as an organized movement from the very beginning. Or it can start with a few people just have a gripe and start something, and more and more and more people join as it goes along. And then it grows sort of in stages. So it can either sort of be a mass movement from the very beginning, or it can be this kind of groundswell that picks up pace as it goes along. Right? Two more. Right? Suddenness. Right? A lot of revolutions can begin very suddenly. There's one particular act that sets everything in motion. Some of them take years to get going. Okay? Think American Revolution. It had been slowly building until the Boston Massacre, right? Sets off everything. So it usually is a slow build, and then some event kind of lights the fuse. And all of a sudden, everything gets going. Okay? Some will very slowly build. Right? And eventually it will end very peacefully with negotiations between a governing body and the people raising Cain. Right? So usually it's a slow build, but there's some single event that kind of sets everything off. Okay? Violence. Revolutions are often, but not always, violent. Usually they will contain some level. Now the degrees of that can vary greatly. Right? But in the end, it can end in the death of rulers, as we see in the French Revolution. Right? It can end very peacefully. But typically it will involve some level of violence. Okay? All of them have a lot of things in common. Those are the most common ones. Okay? All right. Revolution versus reform. There is a difference in these things. Okay? Revolution refers to the sudden, dramatic overthrow of an existing system. And then you replace it with something completely different. That is a revolution. You're completely getting rid of one system and replacing it with a new one. In contrast, reform refers to changes within the existing system. You don't get rid of it entirely, but you do see some changes in how it runs. The goal of that is to change the system without fundamentally changing its structure. You don't want to completely get rid of everything, but there are problems within the system that you do have to overcome. Otherwise, there'd be no need for revolution or reform to begin with, right? So you're making small changes, but not getting rid of the whole thing. Right? The goal of revolution is to enact fundamental systemic change rather than just incremental adjustments. Okay? Reform works within the current framework. Revolution, we want a whole new framework. So there is a difference between revolution and reform. Now let's look at this kind of in terms of scythe. Okay? Revolutions often get a bad name. When you think of violent overthrows, it's probably justified, right? There's lots of anger, there are deaths, there's violence, etc. However, revolutionaries are not necessarily bad people. Revolutions can be bad. Revolutionaries are not necessarily bad people by nature. They see a problem and they believe that they have a better way of doing things. A lot of good can come out of change. It does not have to be violent. A lot of things need changed, and it takes someone willing to stand up and say enough is enough, that there is a better way that we can do this. Again, whether it's government or social or economic or cultural or whatever, revolutionaries are people who see a better way to do things. However, if you see that something isn't working and you think you have a better way of doing it, try being a reformer rather than a revolutionary. Reformers tend to get further, tend to get more things done. Revolutionaries tend to get overshadowed, okay, by what they create. Okay? So if something needs to be changed, by all means, let's change it. But figure out a way that will bring that change without bringing the chaos around you. A recommendation, if you have not considered reading the second and third books of the Arc of a Scythe trilogy, please consider that. Right? Scythe is the first book in a trilogy. I don't know if you realize that or not. I have read the second one. I'm about halfway through the third one. They are really good. So if you liked Scythe, I highly recommend books 2 and 3. And Scythe is being made into a movie. They are in pre-production right now. It will show up on the big screens before long. Okay? In terms of sort of connections to this book, think of Citra and Rowan as reformers and revolutionaries. Citra wants to bring change to the system, right? They both see a problem within the system of scythes and the gleanings and all of that. They both see problems. Citra, however, is a reformer. She doesn't see the need to overthrow the whole system, but she does see that there are problems within it that need addressed. What is Rowan? Rowan is a revolutionary. Rowan resorts to violence. Rowan wants to overthrow the system because of what it has become. Okay? So when you think of revolution and you think of reform, think of Rowan and Citra as the examples of those two things. Okay? Anybody have any questions so we can get you all on your way out the door? Nope. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attendance and attention. Have a great Wednesday evening, everyone.
You too.
Thank you. Take care.
Look at that, under 15.
Excellent. I aim to please.